Welcome back to Subversive, an exclusive conversation series brought to you by Wasafiri. Each month, we will be in conversation with a poet releasing a new collection in 2025. These poets' collections challenge the limits of Western lyric, exploring living in a turbulent world while holding on to hope. Join us as we discuss their inspirations, writing practice, and more. Today we have Isabelle Baafi speaking to us about her debut collection, Chaotic Good, published by Faber. Isabel is the author of Chaotic Good, which is a Poetry Book Society recommendation, and Ripe, a pamphlet which won a Somerset Maugham Award and was a Poetry Book Society pamphlet choice. Her writing has been published in Granta, the TLS, the Poetry Review, Callaloo, the London Magazine, and elsewhere. Chaotic Good is a blade of a collection that both charts and unravels maps of the self, shaped by memory, power, and desire. Looking at relationships as microcosmic mirrors of the systemic forces they're embedded in, it explores the loves that consume us, that we in turn digest, and the self's willfulness to defy its scenes of subjection. Hi, Isabel. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Hi, Prerana. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So we're gonna jump right in. Can you describe your collection in 5 words?
I love what you just said, a blade of a collection.
It
Wow.
is.
Um,
I felt, every poem was a death by a thousand cuts. That's what it felt like.
ooh, I mean, wow, no, I'm so happy to hear that. So I guess it's introspective, um, hopeful, mournful. Um, did I say defiant already? Um, and just memoried, full of memory.
Memoried. I think
Yeah.
that's 4 words. You can add one
Oh,
more.
did I say one more? Um, chaotic.
Chaotic,
Let's
yes.
go for it.
I love how you said memoried because that was going to be my first question. Memory and by extension, I guess inheritance. In The Cottage, which is one of my favorite poems in the collection, a speaker says, "The memory built me around it." And the moment I read that line, I was thinking of Louis Gluck's Nostos. We look at the world once in childhood, the rest is memory. And I loved how memory is so non-linear in this collection. It's like the Ouroboros eating its own tail, shaping and reshaping the self. So I wanted to ask if you could speak more about writing memory as pattern or echo in your work.
Yeah, there's there's so much I could say about that. I mean, memories, like you said, they are so much of who we are. They make us up. And throughout so much of our lives, like I think I saw the other day a video was saying that like the first like 7 years of our life, is just our brain mapping the world and understanding it. And then everything after that, it's going off that blueprint. And, you know, there are things now, even in my 30s, that I'm spending so much time trying to unlearn and new pathways I'm trying to recreate and things like that because of the memories that I have and because of the early experiences. So much of who we are is rooted in memory. And when I was looking through the collection, looking back at my life and looking back at versions of my own life and other people's lives as well and childhoods, um, memory was like a foundational point. It was a central pillar.
Mm.
I think also another thing about memory is that whenever we recall a memory, whenever we retrieve a memory in our mind, we often change it without
Yeah.
realizing it. We kind of reconfirm certain details. Oh, this is the way it happened, or in one version we may think the sun was shining, and then the next time we recall it again, the sun was shining so brightly, and it's just like everything becomes just more and more uh
Refracted. It's like looking
yeah,
into different, like, the thing when mirrors are stacked opposite each other and you can just see infinite reflections. It
yeah,
kind of feels
exactly.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah, like a house of mirrors. So yeah, so that was also part of it as well. And there are times where I'm calling back on details, and then in another poem, it's slightly different. Or there'll be things that I'm writing about in the central speaker's childhood, adolescence, and then when they're talking about their parents, it's the same, or in their marriage, it's the same. There's like these
Mm.
echoes across generations. So memory is definitely tied a lot to like origin, but also in some ways destiny as well.
Yeah, I was going to say there was this almost sinister, fatalistic nature to the memories that I picked up in the collection. But what I also really loved is there were lots of glitches in the poems that kind of fought against that. I think there was one poem where like the pinwheel is spinning both ways at the same time. And so at the same time, a lot of the poems, there was that blueprint that you tend to fall into based off of your foundations, but then the poem that itself was like a portal out of it, which I thought was great. Um, and I guess segueing from that, a lot of the memories for me were tethered to landscapes in the poems, like both urban and wild. I think if I'm just trying to find the line. Yes, in Reader, I Married Him, one of the lines is, if you asked me why I made myself so small, I'd show you the river. And I kind of reread the collection, picking out all these details of place, like mildew carpets, mulberry blood, and the trenches of this hometown that, a speaker is just trying to get out of and never quite leaves. And so landscape becomes, I think, a very powerful force in the collection, like a keeper of memory and a mirror of the body. And yeah, I wanted to hear what landscapes were important to you while writing this collection.
There were quite a few. Yeah, I think the borough where I grew up in the borough of Hounslow. And so like yeah, there's some scenes where that are kind of set there and looking at yeah, the people and the spaces in that area. But then also there are places like Wiltshire. I spent some time in a cottage there during the separation, and that was a really important and healing time for me. Also, there's a poem called Alicante towards the end.
Yeah.
During that time, I also went to Spain as well for the first time, and that was really amazing as well.
Yeah,
Um,
I think there was a line in that poem that said, I didn't know anybody, but there was this familiarity with the place that you didn't need to know people, but you were getting very intimately acquainted with the sea and the streets and
Yeah, I think like in the absence of an adequate language to talk about the whole experience and so much of what the central speaker is going through, there was like this desire to reach out for an almost elemental form of being and understanding the self and healing as well. So things like the ocean become very important. Like the ocean is very important to me. Whenever I'm near water, I just feel so happy. Whenever I'm like drinking water or splashing
mm,
my face with water, it just, just makes me just yeah, rejuvenates me. Also forests and snow as well, like just being in these
mm.
places where there's so much silence and light and dark, um, and reconfiguring my relationship to the world and to myself. Um, yeah, it was really gratifying thing to be able to like write about landscape in that way.
Yeah, it just made the poem so textured, and embodied at the same time. Like every time I read a line about landscape, I definitely felt it in my body. Um, I grew up by the ocean, so I really hear this like love for the ocean. Do you want to
Mhm.
share maybe your favorite memory by the ocean? Or
Um,
one of?
yeah, I think it probably was when I went to Alicante. There was a day when I just like spent the whole day by the beach
Oh my
and
God.
or at the
Vitamin
beach. And
D.
sorry?
Vitamin D.
Oh, it was amazing. It was amazing. And yeah, just being in the ocean the whole day, just bobbing up and down and whatever and swimming a little bit and paddling up and down. And it was just amazing as well. The quiet and the sunshine and yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
doing that
thank
for
you
the
for
first time.
sharing.
Yeah.
Um, I think another body of water I picked up in your work is the river. In places quite wild, I think there was one line where it had sewage in it, and the river just kept coming back to me as well, which led me to myth. Um, a lot of the collection reads like a myth in itself, but also engages myth. I'm thinking of poems like The Scarecrow, which again, I've mentioned landscape again, very vivid cinematic sense of walking through a village. and poems like Janus and Watermelon, which have these many forked or fork-tongued and many-faced trickster figures. And then the other like parallel or combination I was picking up was the language of parables. So things like Call Me Lamb of God, all this hallowed language that's brought into quite laser focus through irony in some places. And I wanted to ask what these registers of myth and parable helped you explore in the poems.
So there's a few things I can say to that. So one is like in terms of the biblical
We can
references,
take it one at a time because I know that was quite a big question.
it was a big, beautiful question. So with biblical language, like the Bible and Christianity were like core tenets of my life in the last 10 years or for a 10-year period. It was like really key. And I definitely read the Bible more than any other book. And so many of its teachings and phrases and symbols are kind of like embedded into my mind, and it's still very meaningful to me. But that kind of that those because I saw myself through that lens and through those teachings and ideologies for so long. There's no way I could write this book without it kind of filtering in, especially when it comes to exploring womanhood and marriage and I guess this sense of like life and destiny being out of one's hands, but
Mm.
then also taking it back as well in terms of like fables and folklore. Yeah, I really think fairy tales are like fascinating, and folklore is like especially fairy tales like a really fascinating way that people have perhaps originally taught children about the world and warned them about its dangers, but through very sanitized language. And
Yeah.
so uh two that really stand out for me are like Hansel and Gretel, this image of
Mm.
two children wandering through a wood looking for home, looking for, connection, and then finding it in someone who doesn't have their best interests at heart, and I guess being seduced and having their desires used against them. And then the other one is Little Red Riding Hood, which many scholars have written about as being like allegorical for sexual violence in various ways. And so yeah, those two kind of filter through at different points. But then there's also times where, I'm uh, creating ways to explore the nature of personhood through made up means and characters like the Scarecrow, as you mentioned. So yeah, that was a way that I wanted to think about humanity's propensity for violence,
Mm.
and the things that humanity and ironically, the poem says, "Am I not a man?" So men too,
Yeah.
men in a way, but also humanity in general. But yeah, in a way that would kind of scare children, essentially.
Yeah,
Not
I
that I'm
really enjoyed
really
that
good
because
at.
that's what I picked up on because I feel like there's a lot of writing that uses myths or like tries to rewrite myths through this agential lens. But what I think your poems did very well was keep that. You read a Greek tragedy and you're horrified, and I think that the sinister kind of trappings of myth was
Mm,
still very well preserved
mm,
in the collection. And it's the same with, I think, parables. They often have like a very clean moral arc. And I felt like what yours did was completely deconstruct that
mm,
and yeah, throw it into chaos. And I really enjoyed that. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. Um, yeah, I mean, life is full of dangers and pitfalls, so yeah, there's it makes sense that those would come through. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Speaking of moralizing, I want to talk a little bit about the good bad dichotomy that you've deconstructed so well. So for me, one thing that even the title itself actually made me go up and look up that meme of like chaotic evil, chaotic good, all the kinds of spectrums between like binary good and evil. Um, and very explicitly in the collection, there's a line that says, "Let's redefine the word good. Like, how does morality hold up in the face of this kind of violence?" And I love that the collection just defies any economy or scales of like balancing out morality. And I thought that a lot of the speakers countered that with their small, furious rebellions in very wayward ways. And I was reading Shaidia Hartman's work. I think it was Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments, where she talks about waywardness. And she says it's a practice of possibility at a time when all roads except the ones created by smashing out are foreclosed. It obeys no rules and abides no authorities. It is unrepentant. And for me, so many of the speakers, I'm saying speaker, central speaker, the eyes in the collection are wayward and unruly and just rebel in ways that people might consider unsavory, but is just necessary. Like, what do you do when within a system that's trying to kill you? And yeah, I wanted to ask what waywardness allowed your speakers to access, and what was it something that you intentionally had in mind while writing, or did it just come up organically?
That's such a great question. I think in terms of, so when I was writing, much of what I was writing was simply personal. I was just doing it to stay alive. Like,
Mm,
it was very necessary. And it's ironic because it's like I was writing about, at times, I was writing about wayward actions or behaviors or thoughts, wayward. Um,
mm,
but my life did not look like that at one stage. It was the opposite. It was the picture of conformity and like traditional female uh goodness, amenability,
mm,
um, submission. And so, and then, over time, I think the writing, in a way, in a kind of feedback loop type of way, it inspired me to live up what I was creating. And so then that it changed over time and it became more of a reality. Um, when you've grown up or when you spent much of your time, your young adult life in a system that really praises conformity and um, obedience and adherence to rules, um, and kind of self-effacement and things like that. To be authentic is quite radical, and it definitely feels that way. And so, yeah, that's where this like examination of morality came from. Um, Also, it was a way of like revisiting, or it was the result of revisiting childhood and adolescence and looking at the world in a different way and kind of wrestling with questions of agency and power and choice and free will. Asking questions like, to what extent do we have free will when, yeah, as you said, you're kind of pushed towards or molded towards a certain way of being. And so to break out of that, it can feel wrong, but is it wrong?
mm.
So, there were big questions. There was another part to your question that I wanted to address as well. What did you say before that?
I'll repeat that, but I had a thought.
Yeah.
So one thing that you were speaking about, how there were parts of your life that felt where you felt like you were conforming, but then, it was your imagination. I feel like imagination, you can be wayward in your mind. Imagination can write reality. And so that's something I was thinking about a lot, that you can imagine throwing a knife at something. And for me, that's powerful as well. Just
Yeah, yeah.
allowing the self to go to slightly more radical places. And the other thing I was thinking about, gosh, I had this in my brain. Waywardness. Yeah, I feel like I've been thinking about this a lot because also, as someone who did live in a very strict household growing up, some of the ways in which retrospectively I was being wayward were detrimental to my health and to my well-being. And it's also maybe a question of um, what are the bylines? What are the ways of waywardness that we can imagine that might not put us in danger as well? It's like, yeah. Um, the second part of the question was it, you kind of answered it already. Was it something that you had in mind while writing these poems, or you wanted to kind of spotlight while writing them, or is it something that just happened organically?
Yeah, yeah. So it came together kind of, yeah, organically, I think.
Mm.
And yeah. we wrote each other in a way, like you're saying, can write.
Yeah.
It's called rewrite history, rewrite life. Yeah.
Do you have a personal favorite wayward moment you would like to share?
Of my life or in the poem?
Whatever you like in the collection.
Oh, you know what I often think about because you like you were saying about throwing a knife. I keep thinking about there's a poem where the reader says, oh, I would have also got she throws a vase. What how do I put it? Um, and basically she just says, you would have caught the vase if you'd seen it was the wedding gift from your
And I would
ex.
have thrown it harder
If
if I'd
I'd
known
known
you
you
would
wouldn't duck.
duck.
Yeah.
Yeah. My very
Um,
innocent, sorry, finish what you're saying.
yeah, and it's just I keep wrestling with it because I'm just like I want people to know that I never actually threw a vase. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm not actually like that, even though I kind of
But
deserve
the
it.
poem is a
But
space where you can be dangerous.
yeah,
You
exactly. I
know, it
love
gives
that.
you the license to be.
Yeah.
Um, my very innocent act of waywardness was my sister really loved dolls, Barbie dolls, and
Mm.
so one day I just got so annoyed, I like chopped all their hair off and tattooed them with permanent marker and like ruined them for her. And that's like a typical sibling relationship for you.
But also, I think you're making a very important feminine statement. You were ahead of your time.
Oh gosh, yeah, me at 9 years old, being like, you know
Yeah.
what? These
Yeah.
Barbies are gay. Um, um, yeah, I would like to move to another thing that really stood out to me in the collection, which was food.
Mm.
Again, in multiple ways as well, in multiple resonances. So maybe we can unpick that a little bit. So one thing, food as bond or like trying to make a connection. So the one that I'm thinking about is tracing the relationship with the father through supermarket aisles and baked beans, and also food marked moments of tenderness in the poems. I think there was one moment where it was like the plum bits were removed so the speaker didn't choke on them. And so food being a marker of care, but at the same time, this sense of saturation, excess to the point of spoiling and rot. The pig in the hometown eaten alive for days, the bubbling sugar in Turkish delight. Um, One of my favorite lines in this collection is in the poem, everything is going according to plan. I was wrought the daughter she wanted, but I stayed. So I was wondering if you could say more about writing food as metaphor and in these different veins as well in the collection.
Yeah. Food is I mean, food is such an important aspect of life, I think, and family. It's a way for so many people to like explore and connect and pass on heritage, culture. It's a form of connection. When I was like a small child, like one of the only times that all four of us were together, my
Mm.
parents and my brother and I, was when we were around the dinner table. And so yeah, that was it was quite important. But then also that was kind of fraught with other, feelings as well. And then it and then while I was married, like cooking was a big part of my life. And it's, to this day, cooking is and that kind of labor is, traditionally still very much
Yeah.
well, it's less and less so, but especially in certain cultures, especially in certain homes and whatever, communities, it's seen as like the woman's responsibility still. And it very much was mine. And so yeah, food was really an important yeah, and a really important touchstone for thinking about the roles we inhabit and what it means to break out of them, and things spoiling over time. Yeah, and but also life being life sustaining, and how those two can exist at the same time.
Yeah, it's
So
quite
yeah.
complex. Because with food, I'm thinking of ingestion, to take into yourself, which can be quite tender. Thinking of empathy as taking in an experience into yourself, and so there's that beautiful connecting tender nature, and then there's the more ritualistic, expected labor around food, and these two things somehow coexist at the same time. Um, what's your favorite food?
Oh, pizza.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
What's
love a
yours?
little. So dal, which is quite simple to make, is lentils, spiced lentils. It's just
Okay,
like
nice.
my mom used to make it for me when I was ill. See,
Mm,
memory, food, another
yeah,
anchor.
yeah, yeah.
Um, Following on from food, also picked up on a lot of language of consumption and hunger in the collection. Um, a lot of the lines are quite compulsive and insatiable, which made me think obviously of desire. One of your speakers says, "Hunger made me, carved me in its image." And I think I was thinking about also how intimacy and danger are very interconnected in this book. There's a lot of interplay between possession and submission and power, and how pain can be sweet, and how there's a certain erotics in submission, however destructive. And your collection and your work, I think, doesn't shy away from that. And I wanted to ask, how did you navigate writing these very complex facets of desire, which are quite heightened throughout, very heightened psychosomatic states?
Yeah, yeah. I think I mean they're quite heightened for me, I think, and they always have been, or maybe I've always been very aware of them. Um, and I feel like they're inextricably connected, like
Mm,
desire and which is not to say like I think they should be, or that that's necessarily what I prefer, but it
yeah,
just perhaps it's just in a patriarchal world, like sex is used against women and sexual violence is so prevalent. And but also I think inherent in desire, there is, first of all, it can be so all consuming,
yeah,
and it's so uh it's so intertwined with questions of surrender and submission and powerlessness, and dominion. And all of those things are kind of part of the dynamic or the experience, at least in the majority of the cases, you know. Um, I think throughout, I was often thinking also about Audre Lorde's uses of the erotic, and,
yes.
she kind of posits eroticism as this creative energy, uh,
I think she
which,
says it's like feeling more than like centering feeling as well. It's an essay that I read a lot as well. The Audre
yeah,
Lorde one,
yeah.
yeah.
And and it's just, yeah, that was really revelatory for me to read the first time, and it just clicked because it just grounds so much of womanhood and um you know in this power that that many of us have, um as opposed to under patriarchy, eroticism as a tool used to oppress women. So I think desire can be very empowering, um and even when the kind of the course towards that empowerment isn't straightforward.
Yeah. I think it links nicely to the waywardness that we were talking about earlier, because when your speakers are following desires in the book, they're kind of charting or treading paths that they haven't before. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
it was really powerful. The other question I had as a follow-up to this one was, with the intensity of these poems, did you ever feel the need to step away sometimes, to maybe safeguard yourself? Did you ever feel like, because sometimes when I write poems and they're this intense, I need to go sit in the park and touch some grass. And I
Mm.
was curious about that process for you, like how it felt in your body to write them.
I think so okay, so two things. Um One, okay, in terms of how it felt, like there were different stages. There were different stages when I
Yeah.
wrote them. Like some I wrote them when I was like kind of living according to the status quo. And so
Mm.
it was like an urgent need to write these poems. I didn't even know at all times what I was writing. It just felt right. And
Mm.
I was like, oh, this is exciting, this is interesting. And yeah, the kind of idea of waywardness was kind of becoming more appealing to me. And I like kind of shocking myself and the hypothetical reader, not shocking necessarily,
Yeah.
but like surprising, delighting, Um, so that was kind of interesting. And so yeah, it felt very necessary. there were also times where my brain was kind of all over the place and I didn't know what I wanted to say, but I knew that I needed to say something. And so, yeah, during those periods, I would just like free write for ages every day. And then there wasn't even the pressure for me to turn it into a poem right away. And then weeks later, I would go back and assemble everything. So it was always very cathartic. And
Mm.
the thing is, everything that's in the poems, as intense as they are, that's like a tenth of what I was actually going through. Because, there are some things which I'm still finding the vocabulary for. And there are many parts of my life from that period and from really the whole of my, first several dozen, decades of life, or first, for the first 30 odd years of life that I haven't talked about.
Mm.
So, yeah, it's just what's in the book is just like is nothing compared to like the reality in some
Like
ways.
finely honed down sculpture of the whole rock.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The more kind of sanitized and filtered through symbolism version.
Mm.
Yeah.
Um, I think this leads nicely to my next question, which is going to be about form. And you just said filtered through, and did form help you filter through some of these experiences? And by form, I kind of mean both the forms that you experiment with, like the guzzle, golden shovel, but also things like line lengths, line breaks, the mirroring, white space. I felt like a lot when I was reading it, I felt like I was, of course, when you're reading the poem, you always relate to it, but there was something about where the line breaks and I like inhaled, and it felt like that might be where a speaker inhales, or it
Mm.
felt sometimes that the claustrophobia, I could feel it, and I feel like there was a link with form there. And so I really wanted to ask you about writing through form.
Yeah, I really like working with form, both like traditional forms and kind of just freer forms and inventing forms. And so with the traditional ones, those really have helped when I wasn't sure what I wanted to say or what the way in was. Like
Mm.
with Reader, I Married Him. I think, I mean, with that one, actually, the quote, um, I'd rather live in his world than live without him in mine. That was very kind of foundational. That was a good starting point. But there were other golden shovels as well in the book and others that I wrote that didn't make it into the book, where I was just like, this is a way for me to kind of uh, jump off of someone else's kind of idea and then
Mm.
use that as a springboard. Or use it as something to kind of push against because I tried to like not always just write into the same feeling, but write against it in some ways. So, and then there's a section like the Patsy section, where I'm looking at a violent encounter from different perspectives. And so it made sense to have all of those poems in different forms. In terms of like, uh, yeah, you're talking about line breaks and using white space and scattering things across the page, and using forward slashes in the GIF poem and things like that. I always like to, in some ways, replicate the speaker's state of mind or thought processes through the visualization of the poem or through the reader's experience of the poem. So, yeah, that was a really interesting way of like inducing that feeling in the reader. So, where you're talking about like claustrophobia, for instance, giving the reader a sense of that so they can
Mm.
experience empathy more easily.
Yeah, and it was very powerfully done. What's a favorite form you like to tinker with? Like if you have a writer's block and you're just like,
Uh,
I just need to.
a golden shovel, I think.
Oh yes. It's
Yeah,
very beautiful to be in conversation with other writers
yeah,
like that.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, I think the next question I'm gonna ask is about curating, because
Mm,
you said there were some poems that you left out. And I know that some of these poems are also in Ripe, which was your pamphlet. And I'm curious about the process from moving from pamphlet to a full collection. Were there, because some of the poems are older, some of the poems are newer, were there any tensions that came along when you were placing them side by side or moving from like. a smaller concentrated work into a longer sustained project?
Yeah, so the projects are quite different, but there are overlaps, which is why
Mm.
there are some poems from the pamphlet which are in the collection as well. So it felt it felt fine to bring those in. I think the only thing was like I think the adolescent section is the one with the most poems from the pamphlet. And so what I wanted to do is make sure that yeah, that those poems really have earned their place in the book because I write new poems as well about that kind of stage in a person's life. And so I need to make sure that I'm saying new things, but also and that I'm saying something different. And so then there's this question of like just making sure there's a well-rounded depiction of
Mm.
the themes you're trying to look at. I think some of them perhaps have a slightly different emphasis or tinge to them, like the baked beans poem, as you mentioned. I feel like there was in the pamphlet there was definitely this sense of like seeking connection, right, and childhood and heritage, and in the collection, I wonder if there's it feels like the stakes are much higher, or like
Mm.
the fallout, the consequence of the nature of that relationship um, has much greater reverberations because now you're seeing this speaker grown up and being married and and making all kinds of choices. And as psychologists have shown many times, like who we choose to be in partner with is significantly impacted by
Yeah.
our childhood situation and our family scenario. So yeah, I think those things have a really interesting place, and they are opened up a bit more through their place in the collection.
Were there any poems that you had a bit of a tug of war with when you were putting together the collection?
Many, many. There are many that almost didn't make it. Exit interview, I went over and over and over and over.
Mm.
Um, what else? There are so many, like so many of the like harder ones, like the mirror poem. What's it called? The butterfly effect. Yeah, that was hard, and I almost gave up on that a lot. Um,
What
like
made you decide to keep it in the butterfly effect?
it just felt really important. Like,
Yeah. And sometimes,
no, yeah,
yeah, sometimes a poem's just a darling and you want to keep
yeah.
it.
Yeah, exactly. And eventually, by I think cutting stuff away and trying to just strip it back, I was able to like get it to work. It's a tough kind of thing to make work as well. Um, yeah, there were a few. Yeah, the contrapuntal as well, the pantoum. Yeah, those ones. The sestina.
The form, I'm hearing the form poems
Yeah,
are
whole
being
form. Yeah.
debated.
I mean, I like constraints, that's the thing. But it can be difficult as well.
Well, to me, I'm glad they stayed because they were a delight to read.
Thank
Um,
you.
I wanted to ask also that you're a very prolific editor and reviewer in your wider practice, and do those things cross-pollinate into your writing, or are they separate modes for you?
I mean, I think the more time I've spent with poetry has always helped with all of those things, with my writing and my editing. Um, and I think one thing that like reviewing has taught me, and editing as well, but like especially with viewing, is like people often understand less than you think they will of your poems.
Mm,
So it's like don't be afraid to kind of like simplify it slightly, you
mm.
know? Like especially this is if you're someone who leans towards very abstract, complex, cerebral,
Me.
syntactically abnormal writing,
It's just
you
like,
know.
just say the thing. Stop.
Sometimes,
Stop
yeah.
being opaque.
Exactly, yes. Yeah. Because people, you're more of an enigma than you think. So,
Mm.
that's the thing. And then in terms of editing, yeah, one thing, because I read a lot of poems and kind of one, maybe one tip I would give to people, one thing I've also learned as well, is to just like start strong, don't be boring. Um, Sometimes the poem ends sooner than you think it does.
Mm,
Surprise the reader and say the thing that only you can say,
mm.
you know? And don't be afraid to take a risk. I think a poem should have something of you, or it should require something of you.
It should
If,
require something of you. I love that.
yeah, yeah. Like if you are not changed through the writing of it, what makes you think other people will
Other
be?
people will. Oh, I want to get that on a shirt now. Take the risk. This is going to be the last question before I ask you to read a poem for us. Can you give us three literature or media recommendations to take away with us today?
Yeah. So okay. I mean, one novel that I really love and that I reread while writing this, and it's actually where I get one of the epigraphs, is Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale
Brilliant.
Hurston.
Yeah.
Brilliant book. And I think, yeah, she was writing, it's just such a bold and defiant story to be telling like 100 years ago. You know, and so I love that. Another one is Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin. Another brilliant novel. Um, and the third is The Beauty of the Husband by Anne Carson. Just fantastic book.
And
Yeah.
Carson, fan club. Oh yeah. Thank you so much. Would you like to read a poem for us? Or if you want to pick a shorter one, you can even read two.
It is a bit of a shorter one, but I'll just read the one.
Okay.
It's called Reader, I Married Him. And it's a golden shovel after the song Midnight Train to Georgia, performed by Gladys Knight and the Pips. If you asked me why I made myself so small, I'd show you the river, the one that would rather gorge itself on sewage than be clean. I'd give you a toe to live upon, a rotten tree to kneel before, a dustpan to curl up in, a name pried from a ghost. My laughter was thin, but his gave all the birds a breath to glide on, remedy for a wretched world. I was never that attached to me anyway, never more than a ribbon stretch away from curling against a blade. I once put a live wire on my tongue to taste the void. It was not without its sweetness. That sleep, like choking on feathers, like him, the place where women went to die. The way he fucked me in front of the mirror, so I'd know that the face beneath him was mine.
Do you want to hold the book up so we can see it?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, amazing. Is it out of it's out
Uh,
already?
it's
Not
not
yet.
out. It's been
Okay.
a long roller, but no, it's right now it's still available for pre-order and it'll be out on the 10th.
Amazing. Thank you, Isabel, for joining us today. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much.